So today's video, we're going to be working on this Ryobi 280R 31cc 150 mile per hour. So the story behind this is that the mother-in-law had this sitting around in her garage for like many years and it hasn't run. I found that the older Ryobi hardware actually tend to be pretty decent and work pretty well. So I'm going to take it apart and see if we could fix it. Sometimes no parts required, sometimes just a carburetor rebuild kit, maybe some fuel lines. I don't know, but there's a couple of things that we got to check first before we dive further and decide to invest in parts. So everything seems to be here. I actually have the whatever you call that, the nozzle, the extender, I guess, for the blower. So and if I didn't say, this is a blower, so yeah, but it is pretty cool. The bulb seems to be pretty pliable on it. I guess this thing was stored well. The fuel lines seem to be intact, which is cool. Our fuel, let's see what's in here. It does have no fuel. It doesn't smell bad. I guess whatever is in there, slightly varnished, but I've smelled worse. See if this thing has compression. Okay, could feel the compression. So let's get started. Now the first thing I always like to do with these things is check for spark. So let's get our spark tester right over here and let's pop this in and let's see if we can get some spark out of this. So we have spark. Honestly, spark is the first thing I always test on these things. So now that we've ruled out that we have spark, more than likely this wouldn't start because of fuel issue and just for it sitting so long. So let's open it up and see what it looks like and see how far down the rabbit hole we need to go. So I'm actually going to start by wiping this thing down so I don't get as dirty while working on it. So there's really not a lot of information on this, just looking online. So got to try to figure out how to take it apart. So you have several screws over here on the cover, and then if you look underneath, we have a whole bunch of screws over here. So whether it just sits on and screws onto that, or this comes out, I'm not 100% sure. But I think what I'm going to start doing is I'm going to take off the screws on this cover right over here and see if this slides out and comes apart. My concern, the only thing I'm trying to get to is really the fuel lines and the carburetor to see what they look like and how much clean they need. So let's go ahead, let's get these. These are actually a T20. I don't have a T20, so, well, actually I do. Yeah, these are actually a T20, and that's where you need to loosen them. Alright, that was pretty easy. That wasn't as bad as we thought. Alright, so this actually gives me plenty of access to everything I need. The carburetor is right over here. It's a Walbro carburetor. And I believe by just taking this cap off, which might hold the air filter assembly, we should be able to get to it and take the bolts off. The fuel lines appear to be intact, so I'm not going to mess with them just yet unless we have to. The whole point of it is try to fix it without spending the least amount of money. And the fuel lines appear okay, so this thing was probably stored well and drained. It is very oily, but I have found that when they're oily, it actually preserves them from the corrosion and the water from ethanol gas and all that good stuff. So let's see if we can get this open and get to this carburetor. Okay. So these two are also going to be T20s. Now this should slide right up. So kind of old school on the design. This is just a wire, and the tension on this is just kind of held with a screw right over here for the throttle plate. So I think if we just back this out, I should be able to slide it. Yep. Alright. And I just had a hose come off. Let's see what else is sticking. Let's see if we could just... Fuel lines tend to stick. They don't feel bad. They're still very pliable. But because they've been on there for so long, they kind of just fuse on. So maybe we could just kind of persuade it. Ow, and stab myself. That was pretty good. Minus the fuel tank, it does get aggravating just... Well, that comes out with me. So, minus the fuel tank, it does get agitating just redoing these, but you know what? I think we'll just go ahead, take a look at this carburetor, see how these look, and we'll just go ahead and clean everything up and just do it right. I have enough fuel lines, and if the carburetor is in decent condition where we can save it and not have to worry about a rebuild kit, I'd rather go down that route. So, let's get this apart. Let's open up this carburetor, and let's see what we got going on. Alright, so let's go ahead and cut these lines out, because they already cut my finger pretty good. Yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and replace all of these. Now this gasket is not ripped, so if I could go ahead and just kind of gently persuade it off, usually with a blade and just downward pressure, we can still reuse it. Because right now the name of the game is just test it and see if it works. I have found this to work, and I've saved several gaskets doing it. We saved it enough just to test it, let's put it that way, but I think this should be fine. So now let's open this up and let's see what surprises it has for us. If we're lucky, it says oily inside here as it is on the outside, and then it's just an issue of just cleaning it out and we should be fine. See if we can save this. I think I have some extra ones. So we might just have to rebuild this. Okay. All this actually looks really good. No corrosion. So we should be able to just clean this out and we will actually be fine. See what the other side looked like. Yeah, everything looks pretty good. Everything looks pretty good, so definitely happy with this. This should be an easy cleanup install. Now be mindful of these springs. There's a spring right under here and it's getting ready to catapult the minute I let it go. So I'm gonna leave this right here for now. I need to focus my attentions towards this fuel tank. So this fuel tank has a filter in there, and I've actually found a kind of cheap hack, or I don't know, maybe it's the way to do it, to replace these filters without having to go out and buy one. So let me go ahead, get these things taken apart, and I'll show you what I do. Alright, so for the fuel tank, it has these type of filters. I guess this was the style back in the day. I don't know if you could buy these because I've never reused them. I get these like all over the place when you buy rebuild kits. So what I just found is if you take off this weight and O-ring right over here, and they come off mostly easy, now you pretty much have the same thing. The reason why you need to take this weight off is because this is actually going to sit in the bottom of the tank through the hole. And if you have that piece over there, then you have like, I think this is what, a ½ inch, maybe a ¼ of an inch height that it won't be sucking in fuel. So yeah, that's pretty much what I do for that. And then I take the O-ring, just like this, and I put it back in. And that way when you see what we do, number one, it holds the filter in. And number two, it also helps create that seal that I need, just as a precaution. The fuel line will seal it off and keep it from linking, but I've done this and it works. And then you have an extra wheel for your, I don't know, car, I guess, I don't know. So now what we need to do is we need to go ahead and run our fuel line. So if you forget which one that it came out of, the loose one, as you can see right over here, is where the fuel filter came out of, and the tight one is actually going to be, I believe, our return, if I'm not mistaken. So what we do is we go ahead and we feed this one through and just kind of play the game until you're able to catch it. Sometimes it comes out where you need it, most times it don't. And if not, you could just get pliers and grab it, but this works. So then now I go ahead, I feed this all the way into the filter. And this is it appears it's going to be tricky because you got to get that filter to come out at the bottom over here instead of like most newer weed eaters or whatever units, blowers, whatever, and that they just have a weight and sink at the bottom of the tank. But this was actually not that bad after I figured out how to do it. All right, just feed this in. I like to feed it until it's flushed right there. So now what we got to do is we pull this and watch it and make sure it's sitting up like that. And then what I do is I pull this, and as you can see, it pulls it right through. Now somebody might say, oh, you've weakened the integrity of this. I've done this a bunch of times and I've never had one come back and cause me an issue. So yeah, I pull it. I mean, don't go crazy doing it, but use a little common sense on it. And the thickness of the tube and the little nipple right over here actually helps with creating the seal that you need. Now, if you remember, there was this little O-ring, or I guess a washer. There is an orientation, and if you look at the orientation, there's actually a beveled edge that goes inward. So you want that to go inward that way to seal it. So let's feed this through. All right, so that was probably the worst part of this. Now that's done. So the next one we do is we just feed in the return line, which I think it just sticks out a ½ an inch, if not a quarter. I'll have to double check on that. So let's go ahead and feed this in. This could be a little annoying at first. Once you get this started, I mean, it's easy, but it's just a matter of squishing the crap out of it until it feeds in. And that might work, that might not work. And it's hot in the garage, the hands are sweaty. All right, so that was in just trial and error. Now, whatever you do, do not drill these, because the tight seal is what keeps this thing from leaking fuel. If you drill it out, then you do take the risk of having a leak. So I've seen people do that. They have leaks, and then you got to get a new tank. So yeah, I just got that in about 1/4 of an inch. That's more than enough. That is just a return, if I'm not mistaken. The fuel actually is what sucks it in, turns into the carburetor, and this just kind of returns the fuel to where it goes. So it'll be time for that. And if you're wondering how I clean this, I just use Dawn dish soap, let it soak, and just get a little toothbrush and scrub everything out. You'll be good to go. So now this carburetor, what I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to, if it was really corroded and gummed out, then what I would do is I would soak it, or you could use a ultrasonic cleaner. You can use an ultrasonic cleaner. This one is actually not bad, so I think we're just going to get away with just spraying it down with some brake part cleaner, wiping it, rinsing it pretty good, and this thing should be good to go. If there was corrosion, crust, something broken, I mean, if it looked really bad, and you'll see it, I had a carburetor that I did that was pretty bad, which I don't know where I have it anymore, and that one just required a lot more work. But this one's just going to be a quick spray over, and we should be good to go. So let's go ahead, let's clean this out, and we should start being able to put this thing back together. So now putting this back together can be fun. So you have your seat, your spring, your screw that holds everything down, and I guess this is the rod that just allows it to swing. So if you look at this piece over here, and I don't think the camera catches it, there's two ends. There's a flat part, and there's kind of one that's raised. That's the one that's going to go on the bottom, because that's what kind of holds the spring in place. So as far as putting this together, it's very straightforward. It only goes one way. It can't go other ways, but it only goes one way. This is actually going to go in the little hole where it sits right there. I got the rod in, and this goes right into that little piece right there. And now the fun part is that this all wants to fall apart, so it's kind of the luck. All right, so after several minutes of fiddle-faddling with that, there we go. I wonder if there's a special tool for it. Don't know. So if you know, let me know. Alright, so now we need to put the diaphragm back on, which, like I said, luckily I had a spare one from another carburetor. This is a Walbro brand, so it is the same exact one. And it's just that carburetor was too far gone to save. Still have this old one, which probably could have been used, but considering they got a little tore on the gasket, I don't want to risk it. So I'm still going to keep it in case there is an issue with this one. It is slightly different, but I guess they upgraded design over the years. Okay. So now we need to put this piece back on. So now our return line goes into the long port, and I don't know if you can see it over here, but there's a little port sticking down right over here, and that's where our fuel return goes into. So, and I always recommend cutting these a little longer than recommended, because if you got to go back and readjust it, at least you have the room for it. I mean, don't make it 20 feet long in a 2 feet space, but at least enough that if we have to do some adjustments or something shows up, especially in the testing, that we can do it. Now our filter goes into the carburetor because that's the feed, and I believe it's the one that goes in the behind right over here. So let's see if I get you in. So now if you look, there's a line over here that has like an L or 90 degree, however you want to look at it, and that's where the fuel filter line goes into. And then our straight line, which is right over here on this side, goes into the smaller port of our primer bulb. So now I'm having trouble getting that fuel line on, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go ahead and take this off, and that should give me a lot more real estate to put that fuel line in. As you can see, and it also gives you guys a better view, I'm able to get that fuel line in, and hopefully it just feeds right in, because these things are like tight. Now we're going to take another line and run this from the small port over here. I don't know if you guys see that. And run that also into the straight line of the carburetor. And this should give us what we need. Now our lines are a little long, but it's okay. So let's go ahead and let's pop these back on, and we should be good and have our carburetor set up. I think I have what I need to start it. I'm not going to put this other cover yet, just in case it does leak or it doesn't start and I have to re-get in there. So I'm pretty sure I have enough. So let's put this on the floor because I don't want to blow all this stuff away, and put some fuel on it, see if it works. Our spark plug doesn't look too bad. I might just wipe it off real quick, just give it a quick clean. So for the most part, the spark plug's pretty good. It's the Champion one, RDJ7Y, and whatever it calls for is what you use. Don't try to use those E3 ones. Those are complete garbage. I've had multiple issues with them when I first came out, and they rave fame to being like the greatest spark plug ever. And I've tried them in cars, I've tried them in this, and yeah, I've never found them to be worth anything. So this is actually pretty good. Works pretty good. Now let's put this sketchy thing back together. She works actually pretty decent, and I'm pretty impressed considering how old this is, and I'll post that information somewhere up around here because I haven't really done any background research on exactly how old this is. I mean, I don't know, it could be early 2000s for all I know, not sure, but I'll post that information up there. Overall, pretty easy to fix and very simple. My recommendation always is, like I say, check for spark. If you have spark, then that's the biggest issue that you've knocked out. Check your fuel lines, clean your carburetor, and if you can, reuse the original carburetor. I do not recommend getting these aftermarket clone ones. It's hit or miss. It's a gamble. You got to tune it. It don't work right 100% most of the time. So if you can reuse it, reuse it. I have this old one over here that I wasn't able to use, but I was able to get parts from it. And what it is that the seat over here is all pitted, so it just pours out fuel. But it is what it is. As far as making this run better, it seems a little underpowered, and honestly, I think it needs probably a new spark plug, which I will get, and I just need to tune the carburetor just a little bit just to get the high RPM better out of it. But it does a pretty good job at just blowing all the stuff out over here. So Ryobi 280R, very simple, pretty easy to fix. I mean, most of these are. People just throw these away for the dumb reasons. Just, and I have found so far 90% of the time it's fuel, just fuel related. Clean carb, new fuel lines, and it's good to go. And I think I'm only into this one like $4 or $5 I spent in fuel lines, because I mean, I keep old parts lying around. But even if we had to do a rebuild kit, the rebuild kits for these are about 12 bucks, $4, $5 for fuel lines, so $20. Let's just round out to $20, and there you go, you got it running. So hope you like this video and hope it helped you out. Thanks for watching, and let's see what we fix next.